So now let's look at a real project, and we'll use the cello Rondo video and just look at some of the tracks and some of the things that might be interesting in there. I'll do this fairly briefly and show more detail in the television section. When we look at that video, I knew more when I got to that, and some of the other thing is a little more sophisticated. So here's the main screen. You zoom in and out with the mouse wheel. The mouse wheel is very useful. If you hit Control, the tracks go up and down. If you hit Shift, the time goes left and right, and without either, it zooms in and zooms out. You'll notice a lot of little markers here, marked beat, and these are where the downbeats are, and that was from when I was synchronizing the video clips to the original soundtrack. And again, I put the soundtrack way at the bottom here, because I don't really need to get to it too much. There's also what I call half bright, and there's a adjustment on all of these clips for how bright they are. They call it opacity on the clip. On the track, it's called Composite Level, and it's like a volume control, but it's a brightness. And there's also envelopes to fade out. A lot of times, there are overlays in this video. There's an overlay here at about a minute, and there's two players, and there's a larger player, kind of bowing that drone note, and he's not full brightness, so he doesn't block the other players, and that way I can show three people on the screen in the size of two. When I first did this, I did it as a standard television format, 4:3 aspect ratio, and then I later made a widescreen version. We're actually looking at the widescreen version here, but I'd already set this up, in order to be able to squeeze three people into the space of two. And that's done with the composite level. And this is track composite level, and so it comes in kind of dim, and these are envelopes that you put in, and so it starts at 35% brightness, goes up to 45, stays there, and then comes down again. And that just sets how bright that is on the screen. This is a velocity, which is the speed that it plays back. So you can do slow motion or fast motion. And in this case, when I played that long bow, I didn't hold it for long enough. So I actually have the clip start at normal velocity, and then partway through it actually goes in reverse, and you can see it says minus 65%, so it actually plays backwards. So I draw the bow to one end, and when I actually recorded it, I drew the bow to one end and stopped. But in this case, the bow goes to one end and comes back again, because I actually reversed the speed. So that was kind of a clever trick to get around the fact that they didn't play it well enough. Here I have this background, which is really just a SoundForge screen cap. And that's a background, so that's going to be on one of the lower tracks. Let's scroll down and find it. There it is. And this is just an imported clip I brought in, again, using pan and crop automation. And as I drag the time slider down here over the duration for which this clip stays on screen, you can see how it pans across. And again, the little box that's moving is the display screen. So even though we're moving the box to the right, that actually makes the image scroll to the left. And I just simply set that up. Here's the initial position is at this end, and by the time it gets over to here, it's at the other end, and it in SoundForge scrolls smoothly as that goes, and then it doesn't scroll anymore. And I'll also mention the preferred format for visuals, if you're going to bring in static images like this. The best format is probably PNG files, Portable Network Graphics, PNG. And it's best if you size them originally to the size of a screen. In this case, it'd be 720 by 480 for a widescreen, or 655 by 480 for a standard television video. And that way, you get fewer artifacts, because Vegas doesn't have to squeeze things and drop pixels or repeat some pixels. I remember when I did this, I sized SoundForge so that its window was exactly that size, and did a little bit of trial and error until I had that window exactly the right size, and that's why it looks pretty clear in the final video production. I also did some panning on the noise background at 126. The noise background is dim. You can see the brightness is only 42%. So even though it looks fairly bright here, and again, this is a noise pattern. It's one of Vegas's built-in patterns. But because it's dim, this is really what it looks like. And it's a background. And again, just for interest, when I play this, let me play the clip. And you can see it just kind of sweeps across to the from left to right, just to add a little bit of interest. You can do it with pan and crop or with track motion. I'm doing it with the track motion. It not only goes to the right, but it also changes size, and that just adds interest. So it's not just moving in one way, but it's also changing its size and shape and position on the screen. It just adds interest. Another thing I'll mention, with a video production like this where there's a lot of video clips, it takes a long time to render. I forget how many hours it was, I know, to render the final version of Cello Rondo, but right now the television takes 12 hours to render at normal quality, and if I do the 2-pass, it takes 24 hours, and I think this was probably like half that. But that's a long time. And when there are many, many clips happening with effects and green screen and brightness and contrast and track motion, the video preview window just cannot possibly keep up. In fact, I'll play it here. And you can see it's very... you can see it's not real-time motion at all. It's going jumpy. Now, there is a preview quality, and if you go to draft mode, it looks pretty blocky, but at least it can keep up a little better, and you get more like, 2 or 3 frames per second. But the quality is pretty poor. There's a really, really nice feature in Vegas called Render to RAM. And of course, you could also highlight a little section and save it to a file. But even easier than that is you highlight the section and you hit the Shift-B key. And you can, depending on how much memory you have in your computer and how much you tell Vegas and its options to set aside, I have a gigabyte set aside in my current computer just for RAM renders. And you highlight 10 seconds or maybe 3 seconds, just a transition or a little part of something. And that might take, a minute and a half to do that 2 seconds, but then you can see it in the full quality right there without having to write files and save files and go into a media viewer. So that's a very useful feature, is to pre-render little pieces. And again, just at transitions, there's a transition where this background crossfades into this background. So you can just highlight that and just hit the Shift B, and there's not a whole lot happening in this video, so that did it. And now I can play that at the full quality. But there are parts in television where it takes literally, 10 minutes to render 10 seconds. It's about 60 to 1 a minute per second that it takes. But at least you can do it, and you can go pour a cup of coffee, and when you come back, you have at least something to look at. And there's a kind of a spotlight that sweeps across the screen. That's a white exclamation point that I just made not real bright and just moved around the screen. Here's the top of the exclamation, and the little dot is up here somewhere. So this is all very crude. And the same thing with the halo over bear, which I spent hours animating. That's just the letter O stretched out a little bit, colored gold. Here's the swirling, and this was done with the checkerboard pattern, which I showed earlier, but set to make stripes by having, because you can say how many bars do you want vertically, how many horizontally, and if you make horizontally 0 or just 1, then you get just stripes. That swirling effect was done with the swirl plugin, and again, this is automated, and you pick the center of where the swirl is to be, and the amount. So I have it start at the beginning of this clip with 0. And over time, it automatically, I set it here, but about 2-3 seconds in, 2.5 seconds in to be 100%. And then it goes back again. And that's why it swirls to the right and gets tight, and then it opens up again. There's a lot of plugins. There are all kinds of plugins. There are a bunch of presets in all of these plugins. When you look at these here, there's just lots and lots of really cool things that you can do. And I can't show you everything here now. I think the last thing that's worth looking at here that was clever in this video, there's an oval cutout where I rattle the pencil between the strings, and that shows through as a kind of a window. And that's done with parent-child tracks 3 and 4. And you can see that 4 is nested. And this is done by defining in this case, a circle, which I bent into an oval shape. And that sets the pattern for which the lower track shows through. The example in the Vegas Help is really quite complicated, and they show flame borders coming through. I thought that was a pretty cool effect, that one window shows through another. All of these backgrounds, all of these pieces were created using Vegas tools. This is probably a letter Z. This is an ASCII character, not a letter O, but it's a solid character, which, just used from the symbol font. The clouds here is the noise pattern. There's a lot of presets on the noise. I use the noise a lot. So that's our brief look at Rondo, and next we'll look at a little more at some more advanced things that I did in television.